4 commissioners of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC, have formally gone on trial before a parliamentary committee, as the post-election script invites the rival Kenya Kwanza and Azimio la Umoja back to the nasty political boxing ring. Kenya Kwanza is exclaiming criminal culpability, but Azimio is screaming witch hunt. How will the ayes and nays play out? Loud shouts of nay have also been greeting the plans to introduce genetically modified foods to the Kenyan menu. Similar noises have characterized the unclear intention of the government to import tons of maize into the country, with members of parliament vowing that can only happen over their dead roasted local maize. And speaking of death, My Take queries the death of building regulations. On the punchline, Gashuri gives some tips on how to catch the real cheaters of national exams. And on the kicker tonight, Kai hosts a 3-way debate on genetically modified foods, that's GMOs. Moses Kuria is in attendance. Guess who the other two will be? The news gang gets to work right now.
The committee must refrain from prosecuting the petitions on behalf of the petitioners. Instead, it shall allow each petitioner to present their case and permit the affected commissioners to present their responses and thereafter consider whether a ground for removal has been disclosed or not. Honourable members, I therefore call upon the committee to hear both the petitioner and the affected commissioners with minimal interventions. The committee is to provide a forum for hearing the competing claims and not a forum for advancing the interests of either the petitioners or the affected commissioners.
And that is where we begin tonight. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. So, listen, here we are again with a political contest on either side of the divide. And the trial beginning formally today, right? So, Gashuri, take us through the genesis of this, who the petitioners are. I feel like we'll end up, hot air and that sort of thing, because now here we are again with another process. And this is, make no mistake about it, a political process in as much as it is a legal one based on the constitutional, threshold for the ouster of commissioners. But so who are these petitioners and what do they want exactly?
Yvonne, good evening. Let me start with why we are where we are. Of course, it has everything to do with the presidential election and the verification process of those results in the August 9th general election. You remember that walkout by the 4 commissioners, Vice Chair Juliana Cherera, Commissioners Irene Masit, Francis Madenge-Wanderi, and Justus Nyang'aya. Remember the Supreme Court petition where the 4 commissioners disowned the results and they appeared separately from the IEBC as an institution, as well as the chairman of the commission and the 2 other commissioners. That is where it began. And actually, anyone who looked at it with a forward-looking kind of an eye, you could see it was going to end up somewhere here, either through a petition such as the ones that are in Parliament, or through any other person asking the president to initiate the process of kicking out these 4 commissioners. And it is purely a political process. Let's get it clear. Much as it's a constitutional process, it is purely political. There are 4 petitions that were filed, and actually the journey or the trial began formally last week on Tuesday, when Speaker of the National Assembly, Moses Wetangula, handed over the 4 petitions to the relevant House Committee. In this case, the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, that is chaired by the Raka Member of Parliament, George Murugara. That committee has 15 members. That number is important. We'll come back.
We'll come back to that, yeah.
There are 4 petitions. One petition is by the Republican Party. It was represented today in execution of that petition by former Senator of Nyamira, Okongo, Kennedy Okongo. And then there's another petition by a gentleman called Dennis Nthumbi. He prosecuted his petition this afternoon.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, there will be 2 more petitioners who will have an opportunity in the morning and in the afternoon. One is Geoffrey Langat, and another gentleman later in the afternoon called Owor Steve Jerry. Those 4 petitions were submitted, and a cursory look at the 4 petitions show that they are accusing the 4 commissioners of the same issues: abuse of office, gross misconduct, and violation of the Constitution. They even go ahead and say these 4 commissioners are culpable for showing partiality in the conduct of their business as commissioners, as opposed to what they are required to do to be impartial in the conduct of that process. You remember, actually, when you look clearly at the grounds that have been raised by the 4 petitioners, then look at the affidavit that was submitted to the Supreme Court by chairman of IEBC, as well as the other 2 commissioners. You will see a lot of similarities in terms of the accusations that have been leveled against the 4 commissioners. Now, the committee will take a break on Saturday and Sunday after tomorrow's sittings, but on Monday, the 4 commissioners will get an opportunity to appear before the committee and defend themselves. Juliana Cherera in the morning, Masit in the afternoon, Wanderi the following day, as well as Nyang'aya. And in each of those sittings, in each of the submissions, it's 2-way. The accuser or the petitioner will lay their case, then the lawyers representing the 4 commissioners will defend them. But now this is where the situation gets interesting. After today's sitting, you remember there were lawyers who came to represent the 4 commissioners, and they were raising objections. And when they were overruled, they all walked out. So, and even the members of the committee who are from the Azimio side also walked out. So basically what has been left in that committee is basically a Kenya Kwanza or the majority side affair in the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee. You remember the 15 number that we talked about?
Yes.
This is where it comes to play. These committees have 15 members. You remember that discussion about majority and minority? It was not so much about who becomes the majority leader or the minority leader. It was so much about the composition of the House committees, because the majority will have 8 members, the minority will have 7 members. That being the case, the majority dictates who becomes the chair and the vice chair, as well as the quorum question. So in this case, there are 8 members who have been left to attend. And
Murugara said they had quorum today because there were 6 members who were present and they only need 5.
Yes. So they're good to go. Put it this way. This is a parliamentary numbers issue. And once that matter of majority and minority was settled, any matter that will come to the House, as long as it requires numbers, i.e. Azimio side, Kenya Kwanza side, majority side, minority side, then you will see a scenario such as the one that we saw today.
So, you know, what does this mean for this commission? Because, Linus, we have to remember that the other 3, that's Boya Molu, Abdi Gulie, and Wafula Chebukati, who's the chair, their term comes to an end in January. If these 4, you know, are removed, you know, as a possible outcome of this process, then where does that leave us with, in terms of, you know, the IEBC and the conduct of the work that they need to do?
It leaves the country exactly the same place it has been for the last 5 years. Plus, our election management system and election management regime has been in an uncertain state, and it's not the first time. Remember, the 4 commissioners that are on the receiving end right now only joined the IEBC
months to the election.
January this year. Look at that. They're newcomers. They came into an election commission that was already bubbling with politics underneath their seats. And they went right to the hot end of it, because these 4 were seen as appointees of the handshake team. And that is former President Uhuru Kenyatta and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. These were their people now going into the commission for this election. And why I say we are stuck in the place we've been in the last 4 or 5 years, it's because little changes in terms of trying to bring predictability to our election management body. I don't know what Kriegler would say today if he was asked about, Justice Johan Kriegler of South Africa would say today, if he was asked to give an opinion on the shape of the IEBC. Because Kriegler in his report, coming hot in the heels of the post-election violence of 2007, 2008, had said, you know, generate some confidence, build confidence in the election management system by, first of all, putting it in place way before election time. And what did we do in the last 4 years? Former President Uhuru Kenyatta left, basically left it in abeyance.
For 2 years? For
2 years.
Yeah. 3
commissioners were operating alone instead of 7 because the president at the time could not make up his mind on whether he wants it fully constituted or not. We joke around with our election management body. And so, even post-January, my worry is we will not look any better, because what are we going to do to generate confidence if it's starting this way? Remember, how it's starting right now is a continuation of the last election. Basically, the Kenya Kwanza versus Azimio, William Ruto versus Raila Odinga. This is section 2 now of the fight. And you've seen it happening today, and let's just listen to the sound bites that we have from that press conference that was addressed today by Raila Odinga and Kalonzo Musyoka, as well as Martha Karua.
Commissioners are supposed to appear before this committee, be found guilty, and be made to appear before a tribunal to be set up by Mr. Ruto that will confirm their guilt. They will then be thrown out of the IEBC. This revenge mission of selective injustice is being steamrolled by none other than the speakers of the National Assembly and the Senate and Mr. William Ruto. The criminal Ruto stooges at the IEBC are being protected and rewarded, while those who fought for integrity of our elections are being punished.
Chebukati's term ends in January. And instead of forming a panel, William Ruto is busy trying to have the act amended so that he can have a selection panel that will create a commission after his own heart. The commission is for all Kenyans, not for one person.
In fact, the country is beginning to get together. But it looks like our friends want to take Kenyans back to the streets. Kenyans would have wanted a peaceful Christmas. But why are you doing this to our country? Cry, my beloved Kenya.
Yeah, the heavy politics, the tone of politics, you will hear the election contest in those tones. But there's something that ought to be said as well, as far as these political conversations are concerned. When the Supreme Court nullified the election of 2017, the 8th of August 2017, it was basically the harshest indictment of the chairperson of the IEBC, Wafula Chebukati, and also, to a large extent, the secretariat, which at the time was led by Ezra Chiloba. Yeah. And a purge followed. Ezra Chiloba was exited. But Chairman Chebukati, who was a respondent in the petition, was actually left in place. He continued to run affairs. Now, Raila Odinga, then the party leader of the NASA coalition, refused to take part in the election of October 26th.
He had 9 irreducible minimums, I believe, for the IEBC at the time, if he were to participate in the second round.
Which included the fate of the chairman, who was absolutely indicted. I think right now, Raila Odinga and his team ought to reflect on dropping the ball after the 2017 Supreme Court decision. The Supreme Court, in its decision, the Maraga decision, really tried to introduce sobriety and accountability within the IEBC. In a way, it's, I don't know which authority that Francis, that normally marks buildings for demolition.
NCA, National Construction
Authority. Wafula Chebukati has been walking with a demolition mark on his back since the nullification of the election results. It should have been common sense that it's not proper, it's not appropriate that this man, who the Supreme Court says and his team bungled the election, should then be conducting another election. What did Raila Odinga and his team do? They got swallowed up in the handshake, which was something that was well received by their supporters, but they forgot the basics. Why did it take another 2 years to fix the IEBC? Why did it take the next election for now the Azimio coalition to say Chebukati was unfit for this office? So as blame games come about, the lost opportunities should also be accounted for. And the biggest lost opportunity to fixing the IEBC was in the post 2017 Supreme Court decision. There should have been a major cleanup. There should have been a major reorganization of the IEBC based on the terms. You read the Supreme Court, it was a common sense decision.
Yeah, but maybe they're trying now to take shots or to try to fix it. Whether that is, fix it in their view, whether that will do any good now, seeing that Chebukati is leaving in January of 2023. Let's listen to what Opiyo Wandayi had to say about Chebukati and his team and how they're conducting themselves in lieu of their exit in about a month or two.
And his fellow musketeers can continue with the rampant misuse of public funds, can continue with the illegalities, including irregular and illegal promotions of a select officers within the commission. He can continue with all these transgressions. But ultimately, and however long it takes, they shall be held to account individually. For now, they may sit pretty, thinking that they have got some protection from the regime, the current regime. But that won't last for long, It never lasts for long. Even within the time of this regime, things will change.
But Gashuri, isn't this the same old script of politicians wanting to exert control over the IEBC because you believe if you do, you will be successful in by-elections, in general elections? And this is the same old fight we have seen in this country from the days of IPPG up until this point. This is all about, who controls the commission. Remember, even in 2017 and, thereafter, and even before, those commissioners who are allied to this political wing. These so-and-so commissioners are of so-and-so. This just doesn't end. We just never fix it and have a commission that, seems impartial.
Because we have refused to drop the pretense. Yeah. And the pretense is that you will have an electoral management body that is selected through a political process that will be objective and impartial. It's the biggest lie. So,
Francis, should we remove the I from the IEBC?
The I is...
It's supposed to be independent.
Silent. The I is silent.
The I is silent. Because, number one, it's a fact that the process of recruiting IEBC commissioners is a political process. The
partisan political process.
Partisan political process. The 4 commissioners who are being kicked out now are products of a political process called the handshake.
Right.
They're now being hounded out of office through a political process now engineered by the Kenya Kwanza team that has a majority in the 2 chambers of parliament, that has a majority even in the committee that is now prosecuting these petitions. That when you even look at the petitions, it is very easy to know where they are coming from. Look at the content, you can easily see where they're coming from. So to expect that you will have a political process to recruit commissioners who will then go there and be impartial and objective, I think it's a big lie. And the earlier we agree, we understand and agree that, the easier for all of us. Now, I look at it this way. 2017 general election, when the Supreme Court said very many heavy things about the commission and its leadership, the best opportunity to reform the commission would have been in 2018. But what happened in 2018, March, there was a handshake. So all the issues that were pertinent and that took us to a situation that we found ourselves in 2017 were forgotten. Imagine, even after the 4 commissioners resigned, you remember Conin Kadha, you remember Margaret Mwachanya, you remember Paul Kurgat, you remember, what was the name of the lady?
There was Margaret.
Margaret Mwachanya and Rosalind Akombe who left here.
When they resigned, you can imagine we stayed for almost 4 years without commissioners. Then the excuse was we didn't have a selection panel or a method of coming up with new commissioners. I mean, wouldn't it have been such an easy thing to do? Because it is a simple amendment to an existing law that requires only a simple majority in the House. If there was real desire to reform the commission, that would have happened. Commissioners who were appointed months to a general election tells you that there was no real willingness to do it. Now, I look at 2 things now in the scenario that we find ourselves in. 1, timing. 2, the desired end result.
And what is that?
The timing, number 1, is we are 3 months after a general election. We're talking about 2022 general election and we are still in 2022. A few months, actually about 3, not more than 4 months. Okay, not even 4 months yet. But we're already talking about reforming the commission. The timing, in my opinion, is very political. Very political in the sense that there are 3 commissioners whose term is expiring in January. So I would think the motivation is, as these 3 go, these other 4 should go with them. And then you begin on a clean slate for a new commission. And it is not just a commission for commission's sake. It's a commission to do 2 things. Number 1, there's a boundaries delimitation exercise that is coming up. It's a very, very political process.
And emotive.
And very emotive. Yeah. So it's a key function for the commission. And number 2, there is the 2027 general election. So you want to have a commission that, as you earlier put it, you want to control. Just like the 4 commissioners, the intention was, at least with the 4 of them in office, the handshake then would have control of the commission. And so some of these things are pretty easy to look at. Remember, as this process goes on, there's also another pending process in the National Assembly, that of amending the IEBC Act through an IEBC Amendment Bill of 2022 to change the selection panel that recruits commissioners. Initially, or the 2017 process was largely religious leaders driven. The proposed commission panel now, selection panel now, according to the bill that was tabled by Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah, should have 1 man and one woman nominated by the Parliamentary Service Commission, 1 person nominated by the Public Service Commission, 1 person nominated by the Political Parties Liaison Committee, 1 person nominated by LSK, 2 persons nominated by the Interreligious Council, 7. Even a cursory look at those 7 can tell you where the numbers are likely to be. So the process of coming up with a panel that will recruit new commissioners should tell you the kind of commissioners that are envisaged. So plain and simple, politics.
Politics at the heart of it. Listen, what would happen if we get to a point where in January, the 3 commissioners have exited, they've come to the end of their term, and the 4 by then have been ousted, and we haven't had, so the commission has no commissioners. What then? Can we conduct elections? Because I'm sure Kenyans will be wanting to know, so what can the commission do and what can it not do in a scenario like that?
The commission will, the secretariat will exist. There are by-elections that are coming up. I would believe the by-elections will continue. However, there are some key policy decisions that can only be made by the commission, and commission being commissioners in this case, that will not be undertaken. Look, if the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee table its report, it's supposed to do that on Wednesday coming week. I don't know whether they will have written a report by then. And remember, the House is also adjourning to proceed on recess next week on Thursday.
Yeah.
So will they have managed to deal with this? I am not sure. And if they seek an extension, when else can this matter be dealt with?
January.
Remember, standing orders allow the Speaker
to recall
the House for a special sitting.
Yeah.
And that special sitting can be instigated by members through the majority leader or the minority leader, and there has to be substantive reasons for that special sitting. Remember, there will be two key issues that will be pending if they will not be dealt with by next week. Remember the Revenue Allocation Commission? There were some recruitments that were going on, so there's need to pass those commissioners to office. And then, of course, the IEBC report. I highly suspect the week after, 6th, 7th, 8th, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, there is a possibility of some special sitting thereabout if this matter will not be dealt with by next week. And if that is the case, random thoughts. and if that happens, the president, and for example, if the report is that the commissioners go, the president will be required to form a tribunal.
Yes.
If he does, these 4 commissioners will be on suspension. Of course, they will receive half of their pay, but they will not be in office.
They won't access their offices.
They won't access their offices.
They
will not transact any business
can't transact any business. Right.
Yeah. So that means for some period, we may be left with a commission without commissioners.
Yeah.
Of course, the recruitment process for the other successors, the idea should have been by now, the process of recruiting the successor should be on. But hey, politics once again.
In town.
In town.
Linus, you get the last word on this before we get the break.
Well, it's not a nice pace. I don't know whether even if it's politics, whether it's a proud thing for the country that an independent commission is actually not independent. And structurally, you know, we are getting busy to ensure that the independence bit will never work. The IEBC has a very sad story because there are only 2 instances then we could call the electoral body independent. And the first time was just before the IEBC came to place. There was something called IEC,
yes,
which was interim.
Independent Interim Electoral Commission.
Yes.
Yeah.
The interim body did a much better job in terms of playing to its mandate as an independent commission than this IEBC is doing. The late Samuel Kivuito, also of the ECK, before the Constitution of Kenya 2010, will be remembered for running a fairly independent election in 2002 and standing firm, you know, as the election boss in as far as saying this is how the election will be conducted. And I remember politicians used to respect him because he knew how to handle them. So we're not in a good space. How it's going to go, it'll go the political way, obviously, Francis, that the majority will have their way in Parliament as early as next week. And shortly after that, President Ruto will form a tribunal, and the 4 will be out. Now, this is how it plays out after the election. This is a purge. It's not a friendly match. It's a hostile takeoff of the IEBC, and that is done on the grounds that, you know, we won the election. So, and these were the guys that were against us. They will hear from us, and the process has started. Because you look at the profile of all the 4 petitions, they're really coming from UDA. Dennis Nthumbi, who sometimes operates as an analyst, is an affiliate of the UDA party. So this is really coming from one space, and I don't see anything that will stop the process on its tracks. I think next week Parliament will do what it does with the majorities, and the 4 will be suspended and a tribunal will be formed.
Yeah.
By the way, Yvonne,
yeah,
these 4 commissioners will arguably be the shortest serving commissioners in our country since we began the process of constituting electoral management bodies. Would you know when they were appointed? They were sworn into office on 2nd of September 2021. And who was the news anchor of the day? Yvonne Okwara-Matole.
Yvonne Okwara-Matole taking a break now. And we'll be back with more. Listen, this is what we want to talk about. A big debate about the food on your table, about the importation of maize. There's just a furore in the country about the food that we eat and is it safe, the GMO debate. And that maize importation row is up next on NewsGang. Keep your comments coming. The hashtag is NewsGang at Citizen TV Kenya. We'll be right back.